Did you miss or what the hell was that? No way. It's on fire.
September 7th. This is a sensation. The loudest emergency in Russia, in the skies over Moscow. Air defense mistakenly attacked a passenger plane, the Minsk-Moscow flight. The pilot's last words: "We're on fire. We're being shot down by our own." The Russian aircraft ended up in the sky over the Moscow region. A Pantsir missile mistook it for an enemy drone. The explosion occurred during the approach to land at Sheremetyevo. New secret data has surfaced. There's panic in the Ministry of Murder. Military communications are down. Was this Putin's order or a system failure? It probably overheated, and it's a sensation. Russian air defense attacked a passenger plane on the Minsk-Moscow flight. This is the most high-profile incident of the night. New details have emerged. A Pantsir system opened fire right in the sky over the Moscow region. The airliner was mistaken for a drone. The plane was damaged but managed to make it to Sheremetyevo. The pilot's last words: "We're being shot down by our own." And this in particular is a very important aspect that we need to consider and understand fully. This is not an isolated incident. Overnight, there was a wave of explosions and fires all across Russia. Russian air defense is now firing on its own targets. Shells are continuously falling on residential neighborhoods, causing significant damage and fear. An apartment building has tragically caught fire in the Moscow region, with flames engulfing multiple floors. Apartments are also burning fiercely in Pushkin, indicating similar devastating incidents. Furthermore, there's a substantial fire at the thermal power plant in Penza, which is a critical infrastructure facility, raising concerns about power supply and environmental impact. The city is in blackout, and this is already the work of friendly Ukrainian drones.
The power plant is on fire. So that's the substation there.
The defense forces struck an aircraft factory and a plant producing air defense missiles for the occupiers. There was also a direct hit on the aircraft plant where MiGs are assembled.
A lot of them are flying toward the city.
But as I understand it, in Dubna, the significant Kronstadt plant, where various types of drones are actively produced, has been attacked once again. Meanwhile, in Tula, there was a notable series of impactful strikes on the Specialized Design Bureau, where advanced air defense systems are meticulously developed. Strikes have been recorded in Kursk, Tula, Tver, Moscow, the Moscow region, and Dubna. The Russians are in a panic. And most importantly, in Belgorod, a Russian air defense missile. It also hit a residential building. Today is one of the most shameful episodes in the history of Russian air defense. They shot down their own passenger plane. Who gave the order? Why is the air defense operating blindly? And who's next? While Moscow is busy putting out fires, Pantsir systems on high-rise buildings are firing indiscriminately into the sky. Today we have with us the well-known military analyst, Colonel Roman Svetan. He will explain how this is even possible and what it means for Putin and the front. And what happens next?
A couple of planes will go down after being hit by these Pantsers. And believe me, the third one simply won't even take off. They'll ground them and just sit tight, keeping still and not making a move. First of all, the Russians really do have a very good army air defense system. That's the Pantsir. One Pantsir then another. Now they've got a second one. They've already stuffed 48 missiles into the first, which originally had 12. So it's a decent machine, an excellent one, but it's meant to operate in combat conditions. That is, when you're surrounded by enemies everywhere, as they say. That's the mode it's designed to work in. Well, it's an army air defense system, an army surface-to-air missile complex. It's meant to cover troops on the move, even during an offensive. It's used precisely for cover, when everything that moves is shot down, because everything is considered hostile. And these Pantsirs, they're good machines, but I'll say it again, they're army mechanism. They put it on a civilian airfield. But only the Russians could come up with something like that. That is, to use such a good machine in this way to destroy any flying object, no matter what kind. And it even has cannons for drones. Well, the first Pantsir has cannons. So they work pretty well. And the same goes for the missile. The missile has a range of up to 20 kilometers. Within a radius of 18 to 20 kilometers. It can pretty much shoot down everything. And these Pantsirs are deployed by the Russians at airfields, on rooftops, even on the Ministry of Defense building. They installed this Pantsir. Naturally, if it starts firing in all directions, let me repeat, it's supposed to operate in the field during an offensive against the enemy when it's covering its own troops. But here, they're putting it on a high rise in the center of Moscow. And where is it going to shoot? Yeah, it'll end up firing at the high rises. Within the radius where the Pantsir is stationed, within 20 kilometers, people should be having a nervous breakdown. Seriously, a nervous breakdown that's guaranteed. Because at any moment, a Pantsir missile could come flying into your bathroom. Just imagine, you sit down and suddenly, hello, good evening, we're from Ukraine. That's pretty much how it happened this time, by the way. We had a massive attack, which was problematic, I'd say, in terms of efficiency. Most of the time, we've said that just firing at Russians in all directions doesn't really make sense. After all, they have those same Pantsir set up and they shoot down most of it. It's better to strike at a single location. Nevertheless, they hit Kronstadt, which is in Dubna. There's a really serious facility there. First of all, Dubna is one of Russia's technological centers north of Moscow, about 140 kilometers away, if I'm not mistaken, from Moscow. But still, the Nuclear Research Center is located there, one of Russia's main ones. You'd have to actually go there and see what they're running in circles, protons with neutrons. They run them in that direction, clockwise or maybe counterclockwise. It's the same situation here. In Dubna, at Kronstadt, they assemble components and units for Russian aviation and rocket technology. They should have shut that place down a long time ago. It would be better if all our drones, for example, went to Dubna and took out one or another target there. Both of them need to be taken out. But for now, we're talking about the barrage. Nevertheless, this barrage strike on at least a dozen targets, well, for the Russians, nervous breakdowns are guaranteed, 100%, because they scattered, firing the same missiles in all directions. They even tried to shoot down their own plane. They failed to do it. Just imagine how clumsy they are. They couldn't even shoot down a civilian plane. Well, I mean, if you look at it from this perspective, of course, there's sarcasm here on one hand, but on the other, it's also an indicator of the technical capabilities of these types of strike systems. And as for whether the Pantsers will hit civilian targets, that's 100% certain, until they're stationed in civilian areas. In residential neighborhoods, they'll definitely end up hitting high-rise buildings. So get ready to be hit by your own side. But they're used to it. Russians are already accustomed to that.
Friends, please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments about the Pantsir targeting a civilian plane and civilian sites. Once again, this is very important. Russian air defense is firing on its own people. Everything is falling onto residential apartments. High-rise caught fire Moscow suburbs. Fire in Pushkin 2. Fire Penza's CHP plant. City in blackout. Belgorod air defense missile hit residential building. Dubna. Kronstadt enterprises. Drones produced. Attacked. In Tula, there have been a series of strikes on the design bureau where air defense systems are developed. Strikes are being reported in Kursk, Tver, the Moscow region, and Dubna. And Russia is in a panic. Roman Igor, regarding Tula, we struck the design bureau there where air defense systems are developed.
Well, you can also use drones to target the design bureau. It's still in an open area, meaning it's not underground. It's not a purely military facility that's buried deep, the kind you can only reach with concrete piercing warheads or ballistic missiles. But the Russians do have some pretty serious design bureaus. There are design bureaus, including some in Tula, but most of them are in the Moscow region and the Moscow Oblast. That's why I always mention Moscow. Although there are some in Tula and a few other cities up to the Urals, at least there are several cities with design bureaus involved in developing aviation technology, missile technology, and of course, ground-based strike systems. But the main innovative developments now, which are related to drones, control systems, and new warhead systems. In other words, this is an entire process that needs to be destroyed at its root. And so when it comes to design bureaus, well, it makes sense to use a drone. A drone, how much can it carry? Well, 50 kilograms in a backpack. Well, it won't do anything. To a military facility buried 3 floors underground, well, nothing will work out. A design bureau can be In a penthouse where the designers are, they like to get some fresh air, and then a fierce beaver comes flying in, both fierce and a beaver at the same time, from here and from there. But in reality, of course, it's better to use drones against oil refineries. Against oil refineries, believe me, even a single drone, if it gets through and completes its mission, can inflict extremely serious damage. Why? Because an oil refinery is practically ready to catch fire on its own. All it needs is a match. And here, 50 kilograms of explosives could fall on its head.
Roman Ilyich, regarding Dubna, where the Kronstadt enterprise was attacked, where they also produced drones. We've talked more than once about Dubna, that there are nuclear facilities there, nuclear research sites, but we keep attacking there constantly. How important is it to carry out these strikes? And you always say that the strikes need to be effective. So do we actually need to almost completely destroy the facility? The floor is yours.
Well, you're right. Even though you're a woman, you've grasped the main idea. Exactly, what's the point of wasting our drones if there's no efficiency? So let's say we produced 100 drones. First of all, people chipped in for these drones. They were manufactured, purchased, and delivered to the troops. After that, target designation happens. They fly off in all directions, but there's air defense at the site. They have those same Pantsir systems stationed there. So the Pantsir, for example, is loaded with 12 missiles. So if you send the 13th drone in, it will get through and complete its mission. The Pantsir will shoot down 12 of them, or however many it can. That's why it doesn't make sense to just send them off in all directions. Sending a bunch of drones, 5 per Pantsir system, that's how they'll shoot them down. What's the efficiency of that? In other words, when there's no efficiency, then the question arises. It's just the disposal of drones. That's what it comes down to. I've already explained it in simple terms. That's how every air defense system works. There's what's called the saturation coefficient of the system. So in order to exceed this saturation coefficient at a single point, you need to send about twice as many drones as that coefficient. If there's a single Pantsir system, just to put it simply, if there's one Pantsir and it has 12 missiles loaded, then with one salvo, roughly speaking, it can shoot down 12 drones, which means you need to send 24 drones there. And then they'll accomplish the combat mission. But as it is, they just sent 5. Only in the information flow can Dasha and I confirm, yes, there was some kind of drone flight somewhere. But as for the efficiency, like I said, even you are already clearly identifying that. Efficiency is important, and that's much more important than the informational message itself. About someone flying somewhere and someone shooting at someone else somewhere. So the military, there's absolutely nothing to it. There's a bit of showmanship here, but believe me, performers have never won wars. Wars are won by the military, who plan combat missions, allocate enough forces and resources for each mission to achieve a certain level of efficiency. And now, at least when it comes to target designation, they're just using some theatrical tricks and nothing more. They made some announcements, teased some things, collected money for tickets, and then everyone scattered. Like gypsies, but only in the worst sense.
Roman Igorovich, here's another batch of information. Last night, the Lukovici aircraft plant in the Moscow region of Russia was attacked. This was confirmed by PRSNBO. They specialize in the production and modernization of MiG-29 and MiG-31 fighter jets. Their modifications? They are also involved in the development of new combat aviation models, in particular projects of a next-generation frontline fighter. These are quotes based on the MiG platform. It is also involved in the modernization cycle of Geran drones, wrote Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation of the NSDC of Ukraine. What do you say?
And this, in fact, confirms our point. Look at what the CPD people are saying. A plant producing MiGs was attacked. As a military man, I immediately have a question for these performers. Did you destroy the plant? Will the MiGs be able to take off or not? What will they answer? No, we didn't destroy it, but it was attacked. What's the point of this attack? So that in the information flow, the CPD people could say that something like this happened. Now, if the CPD were to clearly confirm that after our drone's attack, the production cycle of the MiG-29 was halted for a month or 2 or even 3 months, that would actually be some kind of efficiency indicator. But what do they say? Such and such plant was attacked. There were attacks in Dubna, some plant over there. Something was attacked there. And what's the point of these attacks? That's what I'm talking about. Otherwise, just keep quiet. Don't go around saying you're fools. In that case, just stay silent about the fact that you simply burned through several dozen drones. basically sending them straight into the enemy's air defenses. They achieved nothing. The CPD confirmed this clearly. The report just says a factory was attacked and that's it. But the real report, the one that should have been given, the factory was destroyed, the target was eliminated. But I understand why they can't say that. Because you can't destroy a military factory with drones. Military factories are built to withstand a nuclear strike. How are you going to destroy it with a 50-kilogram drone? Next question. Then why are you sending these drones to military factories at all? What's the point of these missions then? For what purpose? For what? Just to dispose of the drones? I'll say it again. Where can you actually send drones? Because that's why things just explode and burn on their own. You can target above ground warehouses, not underground ones, but above ground. There are transfer warehouses, for example, so-called transit warehouses. They exist at certain distances, like 500 and 700 kilometers away. So you can hit those, you can target airfields and oil refineries. That's it. You can also operate in Crimea. Why is it still possible to operate there? If you approach from the sea, it's inconvenient for them to shoot down targets because they're afraid that our Magura drones with anti-aircraft missile systems could take down their helicopters and planes. This has already happened more than once. So there really aren't any more targets for drones. That's why our information operations people and our so-called political target spotters need to drop this act. In the end, let the military handle target designation and allocate enough forces and resources to destroy the given target. And believe me, when the military does the calculations, there are certain coefficients they use when they figure out how many drones need to be sent, say, to destroy that same target in Dubna, then we won't hear anything else about it. We'll hear that 100, 150 drones entered Dubna, and believe me, nothing will be left there. At least for this particular task. But just sending them out to be destroyed for no reason, well, what can I say? No matter how much we talk about this, everyone is starting to mention it now. Our political leadership is exposing itself far too obviously these days. Such great target designators they are. Of course, it's not even about target designation. They've started an interesting trend. They coordinate the target. Some targets get approved, others don't. That's all there is to it. Those who are for the approved targets, they didn't pay up, as they say. Most likely they paid for the approval. Remember that old joke when a traffic cop checks your documents and keeps saying, not allowed, not allowed, not allowed. Then he sees a 10. Oh, now it's allowed. Go ahead. It's pretty much the same situation here. That's how it looks, at least from an analytical point of view. But as for how it really is, well, that's a matter for counterintelligence to handle. The disposal of our drones wherever they end up.
Roman Grigorievich, considering the aviation collapses, can we assume that the time will really come when Russian Pantsir systems will shoot down their own civilian planes taking off from Sheremetyevo or Pulkovo?
A couple of planes will crash after being hit by these Pantsirs, and believe me, the third one simply won't take off. They'll ground them and everyone will just sit quietly on their butts and not move anywhere. They'll take the train up to the Urals, and only after the Urals will they fly. Well, how far is it to the Urals? 2,000 kilometers. They'll rattle along. It's not a problem.
Successfully demobilized? Commander of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade, Colonel Ilyin Sergey. No details have been disclosed, but everyone is saying it's Karmov, ISU, GUR, SPU. They will find every war criminal no matter where they are. And the Chief of Staff of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade, Colonel Bashkardin Leonid. Roman Lvov, the floor is yours.
This was a strike on the headquarters of the 155th, and in fact, there was a repeat strike as well. And as a result, almost the entire command of the 155th Brigade was wiped out, along with the former brigade commander, who at that time was, and now you could say already the former deputy commander of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. So they really took out a lot of them. About a dozen high-ranking officers were eliminated then. For the Russians, this kind of action is actually very beneficial. For us, they have a deep bench of reserves. Everyone wants to become an admiral, a general, and so on, and the like. So in a way, you could say we help them. Help the enemy climb the career ladder. But in reality, the 155th Brigade, they've already been wiped out 649 times. They're from Vuhledar. In Vuhledar, they lost 2 full formations. In fact, the brigade commander who was in Vuhledar was taken out. Plus, the new brigade commander who replaced him was just eliminated near Kursk. This direction is very advantageous for us because the Russians there, they don't have such a serious layered line of defense, specifically in the Kursk direction. Why not? They're extremely frightened idiots. They thought we wouldn't move toward Moscow. That is, in the Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod regions, there is no defensive line like, for example, the Surovikin line in Zaporizhzhia or Donbass, which has been built up over 11 years. These extremely frightened idiots just don't have it. They cover this direction either with naval infantry or paratroopers. The naval infantry is mainly the 8th 10th Brigade. The Marine Brigade is the Crimean 155th, and the Marine Brigade is the Vladivostok one. There was also the Caspian Marine Brigade from the Caspian and several other units there, plus the Ivanovo paratroopers. It turns out there are paratroopers in Ivanovo, or rather there were. In other words, they gathered up the last guys and sent them to Kursk. Now in Ivanovo, they'll have to set up an LGBT community because there are no men left. But something has to be done because the women in Ivanovo are unbelievably beautiful. So that's the kind of disposal happening through the Kursk direction, right along the route where even the leadership of the 155th Brigade was wiped out. These are Glushkovo, these are Engulf, these are Rilsk, these are Korenevo, these are Chetkino. In other words, these are the rear areas of the Russian corps that's now still trying to shuffle around somewhere in the Sumy direction.
Since January, Russia has lost 100,000 soldiers killed. Not total losses, but killed. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio after meeting with Lavrov. Give your assessment of this political statement.
Well, if Lavrov confirms such losses to him, then at least Rubio can be believed. He wouldn't just say something like that for no reason. The question is, in what context is he saying all this? After all, they're still trying to stop the fighting by giving up our territory. In other words, under capitulation terms. A ceasefire at this point, according to Rubio and his associates, meaning Trump as well, would be a capitulation for Ukraine. That is, it would mean Russian forces maintain control over the occupied part of Ukraine. That's more than a fifth. Over 20% is already under occupation. So in this context, when fears are being stoked like this, then you can see and understand that we are simply being pushed toward capitulation, toward the loss of territory, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and so on and so forth. I think there's no point in paying attention to such statements. Why? Because Ukrainians will not stop. This concerns Ukrainians, Cossacks. Yes, they have never given up their land to anyone. Land and freedom are the main slogans of our people, of our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. So we will definitely carry out our combat mission all the way to the state border. That is, after we reach the state border, we will destroy them. Part of the Russian army, by that time, God willing, with the sanctions from Malyuk and Budanov, we will destroy Russian oil refineries and the Russian economy will collapse. That's when we'll talk about the losses of the Russian army and we'll confirm them. And believe me, they won't be in the hundreds of thousands. They'll be in the millions of Russians.
God willing. Dear audience, once again, please like this video. Share your opinion, your analysis in the comments, and write a few words to our duo with Roman Grigorievich. We work for you 3 times a week, and that's very important. Roman Grigorievich regarding We Don't Stop. So, we've come to an important topic, occupied Crimea. Now, I will provide you with a series of information for analysis and discussion. 2 powerful explosions were heard in the Krasnoperekopsky district, according to subscribers of Crimean Wind. Next, a missile launch in the Jankoy district at 11:25. A loud explosion was heard in the Krasnoperekopsky district. Russian air defense was active in Jankoy. The attack by Ukrainian drones is reported to be extremely powerful in occupied Crimea. There is a massive 26-kilometer traffic jam before the Tachenka bridge at the exit from Crimea. Right now, Puskorosi Roman Grigorievich, our attack on Crimea continues.
At the very least, I think our drone specialists have gotten involved with the shawarma vendors and the 26-kilometer traffic jam. Can you imagine how much money they're making right now at the exit from Crimea? And now even corn sellers have joined in. So, this whole Crimean process, we understand it perfectly well. They're going to make a fortune, they really are. That is, by getting a certain cut from these shawarma vendors, you could make even more, or at the very least buy more drones and send them where they're needed. But seriously, of course, there was an attack on Crimea last night. Drones were coming, missiles were coming, and yes, Neptunes were being intercepted there. Russians on social media were freaking out at night, saying everything there would be wiped out. Not everything, though. Mostly they were targeting the anti-aircraft missile systems. By the way, it was the air defense system that tried to intercept them, and specifically the air defense system that is located in Jankoy. Why is it always near Jankoy? We've talked several times about strikes near Jankoy. Why is that? There's an airfield there, a tactical airfield mainly for army aviation, helicopters, and so on. They reload there. So that's where the air defense system from the SAM is located. There are S-300s, S-400s there. Since we've already taken one out, they've deployed it again. And that's why people constantly hear activity, arrivals and departures in the area of Krasnoperekopsk and around Jankoy as well. This is exactly the work of the Russian air defense, which covers the Kesh direction from the northwest. And that's why it's very important for us not to slow down the pace of our strikes. In other words, at least every other night or every 2 nights, we need to strike at the enemy's air defense, including in Jankoy, to completely wipe it out. That attempt was made, and today drones were sent in. I don't think this will be the last time. So little by little, we're getting closer to our main objective, the Kerch Bridge. Well, and a 26-kilometer traffic jam, that's sacred. They've been robbed, left out in the cold, and so on. So now these are the Russians' problems. They knew where they were going, so they should know how they'll get out.
Get out of Crimea? Yeah, swim freestyle or breaststroke, just like you suggested. Soviet style. Any way you can. Roman Grigorievich has already articulated this very clearly in previous episodes. Watch the previous episodes. Roman Grigorievich, and as for Crimea, the cherry on top is that the mobile network is down, cell phones aren't working, nothing works, and of course the Russian whiners are sending messages saying nothing is working for them. Isn't that just wonderful, right?
Well, the thing is, in this case, there are 2 options. Or start writing letters, send them to grandpa in the village, or dig out the old pagers. Remember, that was a thing in the last millennium. They'll have to set up pager communication in Crimea. But how? What do they have? What? Well, at least they won't be calling through the rails anymore in the end. Although, who knows? Russians, they can come up with anything, can't they?
I've prepared the following information as the cherry on top for you. Meanwhile, in Orsk, Orenburg region of Russia, a mechanical plant is on fire. According to local social media, those are some impressive explosions I see. The plant's 8th workshop is burning. Supposedly, some material caught fire. The Orsk mechanical plant, a major Russian engineering enterprise, produces goods for the defense industry, including shell casings and components for multiple rocket launch systems. It also specializes in equipment for the oil and gas sector. Roman Nikolaevich, well, they sweetened the deal a bit for us with the oil and gas sector. The floor is yours.
Because these are our concerned citizens. They accomplished several tasks at once. First, it really is a military facility. Second, it's an industry, including the oil and gas sector. And third, the main thing, you noticed it yourself. Our concerned citizens have revealed, it turns out, where the orcs' lair is. In Orsk, well, that is specifically there. From there, all the orcs are crawling towards us, well, at least informationally. Therefore, many thanks to our caring people. Thank you very much. Seriously, why? Because we can clearly see their actions, and these actions really do lead to certain significant problems within the Russian economy. Oil transfer mechanisms at various levels are burning. They set fire to the pipelines and they set fire to the oil pumping stations. In Komsomolsk-on-Amur, they burned down an oil refinery. In other words, they're targeting the energy sector, and really just one match is enough. Dry grass is set on fire where the pipeline runs, and that's it. You can write off the pipeline, and even more so the gas pipeline. So they're working, and they're also directly targeting enterprises which in principle can also be put out of commission if you know how. And I'll say it again, there are plenty of people who care, because this war, the genocidal war of the Moscow Empire against Ukraine, against Ukrainians, has worn everyone out, including Russians themselves. All the more so, we remember that there are over 10 million Ukrainians, genetically speaking, just in Russia. And besides that, there are dozens of state entities, dozens of republics and regional state formations, which now are practically conquered by this Moscow Empire, this Moscow Khaganate. And in the end, they too want freedom. In other words, this prison of nations must be destroyed. It can be destroyed from within as well.
Roman Yegorovich, Russia may lose its only aircraft carrier, which has been under repair for 7 years. The repairs on the Admiral Kuznetsov have currently been suspended. Right now, the question is being decided what to do next, modernize it or send it for scrap. I would like Russia to lose all its fleets, Northern, Black Sea, and Pacific. Roman Yegorovich, the floor is yours.
Well, as always, the Russians, they went about it the wrong way, as usual. When the task was set to build, well, to create an aircraft carrier, it was done incorrectly. It was set up wrong from the very beginning. They set the task like this: take a locomotive and turn it into an aircraft carrier. And that's exactly what they did. They took a locomotive, they took this coal-fired boiler, and based on that coal boiler, they built this aircraft carrier. But it's going to smoke like a locomotive, only you can't really call it an aircraft carrier. They dragged it around, dragged it. Once in the Mediterranean Sea, it went in there and smoked up all of Europe. Back then, all of Africa and all of Europe were laughing at this locomotive. In the end, even England, when it passed through the strait, the English were sneezing there, wondering what on earth it was. So they drove it back to Russia, and now they've decided, let's dig the locomotive back out of this aircraft carrier. At least it can haul some cargo on the railroad. So, as always, like I said, Russians don't think things through properly, they don't set the right goals, and obviously they don't produce things the right way either. Now, here's the most interesting part. They're going to try to cut it up. It would be better to just sink it. Why? Because cutting it up costs much more than the value of the metal they'll get from scrapping it. Well, still, let's not give the Russians any advice on how to do it better. Let them cut it up, let them cut it up. Maybe they'll even manage to carve a locomotive out of it.
Roman Alien, Trump has announced that next week he will make an important statement regarding Russia. Most likely, sanctions will be imposed next week together with the Senate. Most likely, oil prices will drop sharply. Roman Grigorievich, considering this geopolitical situation, how might things change on the front lines? This is very important.
Well, so far it's just a statement. Let's be clear about this. So far we haven't seen any real action. Yes, the rhetoric has changed. The rhetoric in principle is acceptable for us, but it's only rhetoric. There haven't been any actions yet. There is, let's say, only one positive point, but only after a serious negative one. After Trump stopped us, when it comes to arms supplies, he has now slightly unblocked them, so to speak, and wants to look like a great winner. But in reality, of course, we have problems with the supply of American weapons, especially defensive ones. These are mainly missiles for Patriots, missiles for F-16s, for NASAMS. These are either shams or PAC-3, PAC-2. So at the moment, it's just rhetoric. Let's do a better analysis when there are real actions. What can we analyze if this actually happens? If under the PDA program we receive at least one batch from the new deliveries, meaning from the new program, there are still several $1 billion left. And Trump can, in principle, without any problem, just by signing an order, give us equipment under this program. That's what we'll wait for. When that happens, then we can say that with Trump, it's not just rhetoric, but his actions have changed as well. That's the first point. Second, the purchase of weapons from America using the NATO budget. For us, that's again a good thing in terms of concrete actions, but that still hasn't happened yet. Here, the issue is most likely related to Germany's decision-making. Right now, we need to focus on the Germans. The Germans will be leading this process. Moreover, the purchases will be made for us using their own funds, European funds and NATO funds. There are three aspects here: German finances, European Union finances, and NATO. These are different sources of funding. And with these funds, American weapons purchased can be supplied to us. Although, of course, it would be better for us if it were European so that they would keep all of it there. The most economically sound approach is for them to keep it in Europe. At the moment, we can only analyze the intentions of the American administration to address the shortage of equipment and ammunition in the Ukrainian army. The intentions are good, there are no questions about that. The question is, let's wait for action.
Roman Grigorievich, for the conclusion, in Russia, they are expecting drone attacks, but not from outside the country, rather from within Russia itself. Sources from the VCHKO GPU channel reported that in Moscow, security forces have been put on heightened alert due to possible attacks. All defense and shelter systems have been brought to a heightened state of combat readiness. FSB officers have been deployed to duty almost in full force.
Well, it's right to be afraid. Why? Because how long have we been talking about this? It's the second year now. You just go to the market, buy an FPV drone, attach some explosives to it, send it off, and complete a combat mission. And when it comes to oil refineries, that's a whole different story. With a single grenade, you can burn down an entire plant if you know where to hit. With a single grenade, you can shut down a metallurgical plant if you blow it up, say, with an FPV drone, or directly blow up the oxygen workshop. So there are these critical points at every plant, at every enterprise, and those who care know them very well. As for what mechanisms are used in these kinds of actions, well, every concerned person chooses for themselves, mainly just to avoid getting caught by the Russian FSB, Russian police, gendarmerie, or whatever you want to call them. And these are the mechanisms that are being used. Today, for example, we discussed how in Orsk, at the center of the Russian movement in Orsk, a factory burned down, or at least a workshop did. So that's right, not in terms of preparation, but yes, in the near future, this process will intensify. It's already intensifying, but concentrating certain means of destruction in one place is very important for us. It's the same as with aviation, with drones, all concentrated in one spot. And right now, the best option for everyone who cares is to gather in Moscow as well. Moscow needs to be burned too. That is, Moscow and Muscovites, those who make the decisions, who practically drain all of Russia, need to understand this. They suck out every last drop they can. They should be the ones to feel this war. And not just the war against Ukraine. This is also a war against Moldova, the Transnistrian Republic, a war against Georgia. We've seen this very clearly. The war in Syria, it's the Russians. Wherever Russians get involved, some kind of war always starts.
Burning Moscow, a perfect ending. Dear audience, we work with Roman Grigorievich 3 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for audiences all over the world. On my YouTube channel, Dar Shaslivaya, Roman Svetan, a well-known analyst. Roman Grigorievich, thank you, and see you again on Monday.
Goodbye.